Morning, everyone. Morning, morning. Hope everyone slept well last night. Reset for today. Haven't really looked at the markets yet. Big bearish move overnight, looks like. Pretty crazy. Good evening as well. Looks like big old downtrend overnight. Market definitely got a little too excited yesterday. Wonder if there's any kind of uptrend that makes sense here. I mean, that's pretty solid on a 15-minute. Kind of broke it. I definitely want to watch how the market sells off into these lows. Definitely got this downtrend too. What do you do when you mark out key reversal points, which are support and resistance, and you change time frames, and it's just either choppy in the middle or just moving inside the zone? If it's like, let's say the big range is between here and here, and we're trading in the middle here, there's just nothing to do. Like yesterday, for a while, we were kind of just in the middle of the range, and there was nothing to do. I find it better to be just avoid those middle areas because the probabilities of a reversal is less. And if it's just kind of chopping at a level, that's not great action either. I like to see a clean bounce off of it. So if it starts to kind of get choppy, sometimes I'll say, okay, I don't want to jump in right now, but if it does one more stab lower and fakes, like does a failed breakout to the downside or to the upside, whichever kind of reversal you're looking for, then to me that's okay. Now it's gained a little bit of movement. But once whenever the market starts to get choppy, I don't think it's worthwhile to jump in on. It just choppiness increases the likelihood of bad things happening to your entry. Did I think my hotkey later yesterday? Um, yes and no, because I guess if I got in the trade, I would have been break even. So it wasn't real. It was kind of a wash anyway. Um, but I'm thankful that that mistake happened when it would have been a break even. Because if it would have been a clean, if it just flushed lower and I missed out on a fast like 2x move or something, then I would have seriously been frustrated. So happy little accident, didn't really cause um, too much. And now, I'll remember, I'll be way more likely to remember, oh yeah, I got to use the right hotkey. Oil looks like it kind of actually failed to go lower and has continued higher. That's interesting. Because the oil's still pretty much at $100 a barrel. And then I'll look at like a daily chart for the S&P 500 here in a minute. Just kind of want to look at the smaller time frames, see what we're kind of doing. Because this downtrend, anything's possible as usual. It's like we're definitely in a spot where I could see things trying to bounce, but I definitely don't want to long before it breaks this downtrend. Definitely could look for a short, a spike higher, and a short to continue to the downside as well. That's totally possible. When I traded triple bottom as well as a head and shoulders, triple bottoms get a little tricky because to me, at least on a 1 minute chart at a zone, a triple bottom starts to get in that area where it's like starting to look choppy, you know? So I think that's the tricky part about a triple bottom. Because at that point, to me, it's like a lot of times a triple bottom or top can start to just look like a bull or bear flag. And that's not always something I like to reverse off of. It can happen. Like you can have the market just pop up, flag out for a minute, and then just reverse. We kind of had that yesterday on the NASDAQ. That initial morning spike chopped around for a tiny bit and then had kind of a failure and pulled back. I don't know if I'm necessarily looking for a long yet here. I definitely want to see what the pre-market looks like and how we kind of open. Still got, 20 minutes of price action have happened pre-market, and then see how we open. If we kind of just open and continue lower a little bit. What if it's just stuck in a zone to still not enter? I mean, I think it's once it's kind of stuck and it's just sitting in a zone. Again, to me, that's being choppy. Like if it popped up here and just kind of sat here for like 30 minutes, to me, that's just choppy at that point. Like I need to see some kind of break of movement because I think the edge is rapidly declining. Morning, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. Big old sell-off overnight. We have had definitely like with I don't really, I'm not really following the news. I should probably be looking at it a little bit more than I am, to be honest. But like whatever's going on in China, like it's definitely moving the market right now. Um, and I think it'll be interesting because what we've had in the past is when there's news potential still happening. Um, I don't know if things are still happening over the weekend, but my thought is if Trump and everyone is still in China doing negotiations or whatever they're doing over there. I live under a rock right now. Um, but that's going to affect the market today. Like the last month, and with the Middle East, anytime it would be a Friday, we would just sit here because nobody would want to do anything into the weekend. Because the idea is the market closes, 2 days happen where massive news could happen, and it could either spike up a crazy amount, um, or it could spike down a crazy amount. So, even though it says someone, it sounds like they maybe are done with that, but it could be even the anticipation of, okay, maybe they're done, but maybe they, it still just happened. So I want to be aware of today that could happen, especially because the market was insane this week. I mean, I don't remember a week that was this crazy in a long time. Um, on a daily, it kind of just looks like, okay, well, we're just moving up. And right now, the daily chart is a big bearish candlestick. But the last few days have just been so crazy volatile. It's been insanely difficult to decipher what's going on. Um, and I think if this holds, like I think it opens the door for us to. I've been kind of looking and waiting for a pullback down to this level. Or it opens the door for this uptrend to really slow down. But I don't want to just. I want to be patient and know that we've been having big pullbacks in these uptrends, and the market can continue higher still. NASDAQ on a daily chart to look at that as well. Huge. We've been having huge. The NASDAQ has been crazy this week, like huge volatility here. Made a new high. Now we're down a lot actually. Like, what are we? I'm just gonna look at like overall. Wow. The Qs are down 1.7% overnight. That's a huge overnight down move. The SPY is down over 1%. And so that is a massive move down. The question is that momentum going to continue to the downside? Or is, the overall bullishness gonna come back into play? We do have this big trend line, I think, on a 15-minute for the S&Ps. We could be breaking it right now. This could be a final little punch lower in reverse, though. I could see that happening. NASDAQ switching back to a 15-minute. Kind of very similar thing. We're kind of coming back to this area. So I definitely see a potential for support here, but if the bigger picture trend is just going to start, I think this uptrend has been so strong. So if we start to sell off, especially on a Friday, and we punch down to here, there's going to be so many people that get margin called, and it's just going to start destroying people that are just over leveraged to the long side after just months of just permanent moves to the upside, that the market could whip down very quickly because of that over leverage that's happening. People just start to get insanely greedy when, every pullback just gets bought. And when you look at a trend like this, to go back to it one more time, is, people will have missed it this whole way, and then it's continuing to go, and people will finally FOMO in somewhere up here, and then that's when it will just rip down. Again, I'm not necessarily buying or shorting just based on that idea, but I want to be aware that that's a big possibility, and potentially look for shorts, knowing that that could happen. Oil chart here, just to look at oil on a daily real quick. Oil's still just doing really the same thing. It's just in this kind of wedge right now. Not really doing much. Markets haven't been super correlated there recently. It's just kind of slowly trending higher here. I don't really think there's that much to look at with oil right now. In terms of news, today basically has no news. That's kind of nice. Don't have to really worry about that. A small super minor news is about to pop out in literally 30 seconds. I don't think that's really going to do anything. So we could get kind of could happen like yesterday. This could kind of just bottom at the open. We're definitely getting kind of a bottom here. And then if we move up, I'll definitely look to see, okay, where does it make sense to get in a short if that is looking like it's going to set up. Because even though we're down a ton already, there's probably so many people that bought long yesterday and held overnight and are just going to be in deep trouble right now. And, they'll probably hold for a little while. if the market pushes up to try and see what goes on. But if we start to go down, I definitely could see it accelerate just because people will be having to close their positions. There we go. My chat box was broke this morning. Is we working now? So we'll see what happens. Also keep in mind, at least for me, what I'm trying to think about today is this week has been very difficult. Every day has been extremely hard to understand what's going on, just with the volatility and craziness. Like the Nasdaq yesterday was just like crazy move up, crazy move down, and then kind of did a bottom and continued higher. And it just was very difficult to trade. And then for me as well personally is like that on top of streaming has been just even very, very stressful. And so trying to, know that it's Friday, it's the end of the week, I'm more drained than earlier in the week. I want to keep that in mind for trading today and knowing that I'm starting with a lower, I guess, body battery or higher decision fatigue than normal. Welcome everyone. Morning. Got about 10 minutes, 13 minutes until the market opens. Big picture today, I mean, I think we could, again, as usual, go either direction. I think the big thing is seeing, okay, are we just going to bottom at the open and reverse some of this overnight move down? Or are we going to push up and actually continue the sell-off? I think continuing the sell-off is a better trade, to be honest. Especially because I think the downside potential could be pretty dang high if it does get going. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll try and answer them. You do need to subscribe to the channel to answer questions, and then just a couple minutes, and you'll be able to do that. So the usual, yeah. I mean, pretty. Again, for people who've been here, just looking for the usual. Where is the major reversal zones, and then I want to see how the market opens. Do we get a good move? Give it 15 minutes to get a good read on what the market is doing today, and then from there try and execute something. Yesterday I was very torn with should I have jumped in along on the Nasdaq here or not, because to me this candlestick reversal here was a massive signal that was it, that this was the bottom, just because of how this acted and how it reversed. To me, that's a massive signal that it's going to, put in a low here and continue higher, major trend wise. And then seeing this double bottom. And so, I was conflicted though, because it was middle of the range. The S&Ps were actually just kind of sitting like this, looking pretty bullish. And so this is a spot that's outside of my comfort zone to jump in long. But again, I've been trying to work on this for a few weeks now, is when I have those reads still, if it makes sense, and maybe this one doesn't, but jump into these kind of spots with, a wider stop, a little smaller size, and just kind of look for the major trend to move up. Just because that's what's been working a lot better these days, is kind of just going for the major swing and knowing that it's going to be a little crazy. And it's going to have some volatility, but the big picture of read that I have is usually being correct. Okay, it's going to go up. And so just having to be a little more wide with things has made that more possible. In terms of other markets and stuff, I pretty much only look at the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ futures. And I don't really use other indicators. The only indicator I use is a fair value gap indicator that you can see here on a 5-minute. Otherwise, I literally just look at the price movement. When do you decide to switch between trading the ES and the NASDAQ? Which one to enter in? Honestly, I feel like I don't have a perfect definitive answer, because I like the methodical movement and the clear movement of the S&P 500. Usually I feel like the signals are better, and if it's going to go up, it's going to be a little more easier to hold, trail your stop loss up, versus the NASDAQ can definitely have bigger moves, but it'll have more volatility, which is harder to hold. And sometimes I feel like the signals are not as solid. But, sometimes you could get, if you trade the NASDAQ, you would get more, you would get better risk reward, essentially more money versus the S&Ps. So, and then sometimes it's vice versa, where I think Wednesday, the trade I was in, the NASDAQ I would have been knocked out on if I was just trailing my stop. It had some aggressive spikes lower, to where if I was trailing up on the swings, I would have got knocked out. But the ES was just like this, and it was very clean to hold. So it's honestly difficult to know. And you don't want to beat yourself up about it, because a lot of it's, you don't know which one's going to act better sometimes. Sometimes one will be looking more favorable, and then you'll jump in that one, and then the other one will actually do better. And so I try and think about it as use it a little bit, and you mainly use them together in terms of correlation. I just added these two things to my reversal checklist this morning. But a big thing is making sure that the ES and the NQ are correlated, right? And if they're not, then I'm not going to take a trade. But if they are, that's a big signal for me to take a trade. NinjaTrader looks like a pain to set up. Honestly, I think any platform that you're not used to is a little frustrating. Like if I literally go to TradingView, I'm confused, even though in reality it's a pretty simple platform, just because the buttons for indicators and how to change your time frame on your chart is different. And so I think any platform has an initial learning curve that is annoying, especially if you're used to a certain style. But once you're set up with NinjaTrader, and I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel, I think it's really, really powerful, especially because it's futures focused. So it's really good to start out and learn and demo trade. But then once you switch to actually trading real money, the brokerage side of things allows you to have really low margin requirement, which allows you to start a really small account, which is really good for scaling and growing. The checklist is updated. I think a couple of people were mentioning this, just because there is other things I like to look for that weren't on there. And I think they are important to have, even though they're in my mind and I'm always thinking about them, But I think in terms of for you guys and people kind of understanding what I'm doing, I think that definitely helps. Big old spike here at a funky time, which is interesting. Been watching me for a couple years, just noticed the lives. That is really nice. I appreciate you being around that long. Yeah, just started live streaming, doing it consistently 4 to 5 days a week, indefinitely at the moment. I will say this week has been very stressful. Just the growth that the live stream has had. It's almost like I'm increasing my trading size every single day. It just, I almost mentally can't keep up. And so there's definitely some growing pains and stress that it's adding, along with trading. And so that's just something I am personally adjusting to. But it's, obviously it's very cool that people are finding this, that, that the way I'm doing things is resonating and helping out. The web version of NinjaTrader is different. Yeah, NinjaTrader's web is technically Tradeovate. They bought Tradeovate a couple years ago now. But it's definitely different. Looks like we literally just popped up to this 5-minute trend line. I would assume we'll pull back and continue higher, and that we just got a little overexcited there. We shall see. I appreciate all those kind words. I definitely, even though I don't necessarily respond to them every time, I definitely see them. So I really appreciate that, everyone. Let's see, we're getting pretty close. I'll just run through things real quick for everyone just coming in. Good morning, welcome. I'll just move this out of the way for a second. Big sell-off overnight. I think the S&Ps were down over a percentage right here. The NASDAQ, I think, is down over a percentage. I think 1.7% it was down. So huge sell-off overnight. Apparently, maybe I don't know if this is true, but maybe the market didn't like whatever happened in China. Either way, doesn't really matter why we're selling off. It just matters that we are. That's why I don't read into news too much, because it's just looking at price action is going to tell you what the market's thinking, and you can react based on that. So actually, I think this is a good level to keep track of today right here too. I think the big question is, do we just pop and come up like literally 50% of this move, which would be basically here, and then decide which way we want to go to just have a healthy pullback? Or are we just going to pull back a little bit and continue this trend to the downside? There's a lot of people that are probably in trouble. And if this doesn't pop pretty quickly, those people are going to have to start closing out their trades. But we have seen every move down and every crazy spike lower just get bought up this week. And so even though this is a lot bigger of a sell-off than we've had, I don't think that puts it out of the woods that we could just do a massive move up today. It's been a roller coaster of a week, very hard to understand and know what the market might do just because of how crazy it's been. And sometimes the market's like that. I haven't seen a week like this in a long time. And because of that, I'm okay sitting on the sidelines more. It's hard when there's so much movement and you theoretically think there's so much money to be made, but it's also very, very hard to actually effectively trade. It's very easy to let a market like this just chew you up because you're trying to react and trying to catch moves. Oil here, not really doing much. I thought this might be head and shoulders yesterday, but that actually just turned into a little push lower and continue higher. We're pretty much oil on a daily. Oh gosh, I switched to a volume chart. Oil on a daily is still just in this big wedge. Not really. I don't really see that changing anytime soon. So not huge correlation there. So I mean, I think we're gonna have, especially since this sell-off, I think today is gonna have some serious fireworks. And I think the question is trying to stay, market's open now, trying to stay calm and focus on waiting to have a clear read and then entering in if it makes sense. But if things are just all over the place like they have been, I'm okay sitting out too, because I don't want to, you want to focus on your entry and was it a good decision, right? Not the outcome. And if I enter in a trade based on FOMO and indecisiveness, to me, that's not a good entry, even if it ends up being a win. I would rather jump in a trade that loses, but checked everything off on my checklist and looked really good. And I'm, entered in, did everything right, and it loses, than enter in on a crappy trade that ends up winning, because that's what's way more sustainable trading. Wondering if there's a little trend line like this. The major trend line overnight was kind of this, but it seems like we've kind of broken that, but could still be in this. I was kind of thinking we might have a little spike up this morning and then sell off. But if it's just going to do it like this, that's not something I can, that's just crazy volatility. That's not tradable. And so just got to be really patient this morning, seeing what the market does, seeing how we open. I like this zone, this little double bottom here, little fail breakout. I think if we we could set up something here, but definitely don't want to rush it. It's Friday, keep it safe. Yeah, especially with how this week has been. The market's just insane right now. Talking to other people and traders, like it's extremely difficult. And so it's when markets are doing this kind of stuff, it's okay to sit out and wait for things to settle a little bit, because you don't want to look back in a week and things be good and great. In a week we could, like next week, things to be a lot more clear, could have some great trades. And if we, and if I like blew up my account this week or lost it, had a ton of losses that I had to make up for, the next week when things are a lot clearer and I'm having good trades, that makes it a lot harder to, instead of now being in the profit, I'm just recovering, right? I left my water, 1 second. What tool do I use to draw? It's called Epic Pen. It's a third-party tool. You can just Google it. Why is the correlation between the ES and the NASDAQ significant? I've just noticed over time of watching both of them and trading both of them that if they are not aligned, the read and the move is very, very difficult. Like, let's say the NASDAQ just sits here and chops, and then the ES, does the sell off and looks like it's going to bottom here. I find it less likely that it's actually going to bottom if the NASDAQ's just sitting there chopping. A lot of time it's actually more likely that it continues lower and the NASDAQ eventually starts doing this. But essentially, because they both move together, I want to see movement and volatility because that's how you get profit from a trade, right? I need to have movement. And if one is not moving, because both of them are they have a lot of the same stocks in them. If one isn't moving, that means there's a large portion of that index that isn't moving. And so, again, it's going to be less likely that things play out. Lost big this week having FOMO. I'm sorry to hear that. It hurts when it happens. I think just the biggest thing is use it as a learning lesson. You got one more day. Try and adjust and be patient today. In a lot of ways, just sit on the sidelines because it's been an emotional, tough week. Just watch and work on that patience muscle. And then over the weekend, try and really have some reflection and study on why you FOMO'd, what were your impulses? How can you avoid that in terms of, are there rules to help you avoid that in terms of trading less time, getting off when you feel a certain way and frustrated, or, if you feel a certain way, that means you can't take a trade either. Big things to kind of think about there. Trading is a constant growth. And so you kind of want to be doing that all the time. You want to be focusing on what's the next step to continue to get better and better. For me, like this week and the last couple weeks, I've been really focusing on trusting my reads a little bit more in these funky spots where it doesn't necessarily fit like an A+ setup, and trying to figure out how to enter in those better, so I can just kind of catch the move a little bit. And it's, a smaller trade. It's the risk reward isn't as good, but doing those can definitely still add up over time. And, I think my reads are strong enough to be able to do that. But it's just, it's a slow process. I can't do that in a week. It takes me weeks to slowly get better and better at that, especially in how crazy a market this has been. Okay, just run through things quickly again, as we've been open for a little while. Welcome, everyone. Big sell-off overnight. Basically, I'm looking at this support zone, seeing if we're going to hold. But big picture, we're definitely still in a big downtrend. The market had a big opening whip this morning. To me, that's a big bearish signal. But on the flip side is this just a whip and then we recover? The market has been very bullish recently. Been able to seriously recover some serious sell-offs. It's been just very difficult to read. So I think we could go either direction. I think we could bounce here and literally just do, I don't know, go up to here, 50% of the move. We could pop here and then continue the sell-off. Or we could, pop up a little bit and continue lower. I think it's very, very possible either thing happens. we're kind of in this area. I would definitely be interested in a long down here. Just seeing how this reacts. I'd want to see a little head and shoulders here. I think in terms of checklist, we do have, I think the major trend bias, I think the read is we can go either direction. ES and NQ are correlated enough for me. We're at kind of this reversal zone. To me, I think, especially on the ES, I think this looks really solid. A swing here, double bottom here. And we've definitely had an unhealthy move this morning. Even if it means we just pop up to here and get out of the trade, I think that's definitely a good spot. Now, if NASDAQ is just going to be kind of whippy like this, we'll see. You know, I think this is definitely still in a spot where it might just whip up and continue lower. So I want to be very patient with these last couple of things of looking for an actual entry. And most likely I will still just half size because of just how crazy this market is. You know, I think we do have a potential to just whip up, but we also have a pretty good potential to just and like look how wide this stop needs to be. One contract, maybe I'd take two here, but the stop is so wide right now, just because the volatility is huge. I mean, this candlestick is 10 points, a little over. We actually haven't seen volatility that big yet. I think this is the biggest volatility we've had all for the last month, maybe. So things are definitely almost a little too crazy right now. And so I'm okay waiting and seeing. I think ideally, it actually makes one more stab lower and shows a solid fake to the downside versus just kind of a bottom here, because that has an easy chance to just rip and continue lower. But I want to be ready because the potential is, you know, volatility has a lot of potential. But generally, I feel like this week the better read has been 15 to 30 minutes into the market open, trying to kind of see how things set up. If you guys are new, I pretty much do this every day. The platform I'm using is NinjaTrader. They actually have a demo trading tournament on right now that has real cash prizes of $250,000. You can go get a link for that in the description of this video. It's a pretty cool way to just literally just demo trade and practice. There's a couple qualifier tournaments that they're actually almost full. I would say if I've been, you know, if you haven't got in yet, it's literally 90% full, this qualifier. But it's like a $20,000 prize pool for the qualifier. And then the last prize pool is like $100,000 for the winner. So it's pretty crazy. We are moving lower though. I definitely liked a short on a spike higher, but this was just, if it happened in the opening whip like it did, not a spot I want to trade. I don't necessarily think the trend is broken yet, actually. I'm going to unclick that. Will I put a trade on today? I'll put one on if my strategy sets up. That's the most important thing about trading, is not forcing a trade. Is you are waiting for your strategy to set up. And if it does, take a trade. And if it doesn't, you move on with your day and trade the next day. You don't want to go into trading. A lot of people have like a daily trade amount that they're a goal, or daily money amount. I think that's very damaging, because then you go into every day with the pressure of having to find a trade. You don't want that. You don't want the pressure to have to find a trade. You want to just show up and see if it fits, hits the items on your checklist, and then you take a trade if it happens. Because if you have that pressure, you're going to force something in a bad market. NASDAQ here is kind of pushing to these. This is a nice support level on the NASDAQ. Looks like we're going to push to that. The ES, to zoom out a little bit, a lot farther to go. Maybe there's a little bottom here. We'll I think this bottom right here on the ES kind of aligns with the NASDAQ. And as this moves down, I'll just kind of update my levels. And I'm not against, if we get a pop, looking for kind of a short. If it sets up in a way, it comes to this, essentially this area that's previous support, and it looks like it's going to kind of sell off. Just trying to look at my levels here, see if I've got everything. And kind of like I said earlier, if we just do a little fake here, pop up and do a higher low, I think that could be, the market could fake lower. Everyone might think, oh, we've made a new low. We made a spike. This is a great trap to the long side. We're just going to continue this big trend down. We're already down a crazy amount. And so I think it's definitely at a spot where we could bottom. I try and be very neutral in my bias of not thinking, oh, it's going to sell off because of, it's bearish. I just look at, okay, well, what's the market telling me? If it comes down here and pops up and starts to make a head and shoulders here, to me, that's a good signal to go higher. Same with the ES here. This could be a fake lower. We broke the pre-market lows here. And if it sets up a head and shoulders here, I like that to the long side. But I don't know it's going to do that. It's more of I am ready and looking and trying to think about, okay, what do I want to see to jump in a trade? That's the biggest thing. It's not trying to convince yourself to get into a trade. It's almost thinking about the market needs to convince me. I'm not trying to look for excuses to jump in. I'm almost looking for reasons, like prove to me why I should jump in, versus trying to look for every little confirmation signal to jump in. But this, I think, is a good bottoming signal. I actually really like this. I definitely like this for a bottoming signal. I think that could be a fake lower. The NASDAQ here is making a big punch higher. I would like to see some sort of pullback here. I'm not just going to jump in on a long here. I think we could come up here kind of to this area, have a little pullback, and then I'd like to go long. Just trying to be patient here. Wait for this to set up. I don't want to. I don't want to just because I like this. I don't want to just jump in. Because the Nasdaq here is just choppy. We could just pop up here. It could be a little bit more of a spike higher and technically still continue lower. To me, it hasn't actually made a higher high here, and it hasn't actually made a higher low. So, if you're new, what I'm pretty much looking for is just the reversal pattern I want to see is a head and shoulders. And then I will actually look at, I almost want to put my stop just below here. Because to me, this is the bottom signal. And I don't necessarily think this low is going to get taken out. It really depends what this pullback looks like. And honestly, the Nasdaq might be the better trade because it's acting a little more bullish. The ES move down is a little cleaner, and this head and shoulders is pretty clean. In terms of the Nasdaq, I think it would just be too big a size. The volatility is just too big. I could have my stop here, but just with how this market is, I would rather have a wider stop. Because again, I think if it's going to go up, it's going to go up. And I'd rather be riding this of like, okay, well, it could pop up here, it could pull back, and then continue higher. And so I think with how this is acting, I do want to jump in a order here on a break. Just trying to watch, see what the Nasdaq does here. I would like to see a tiny bit of a pullback here, but I'm going to put an order in. Again, just because my stop is at the extreme. Doing smaller size again because the market's crazy. But in terms of big picture, I think this is a pretty clean head and shoulders. I like this signal as a new low. But, doing smaller size because we could just rip lower. Anything is possible in this market right now. But I think the potential for big volatility is there. And so if I'm correct on direction, things would get paid well. And thinking about entering this, I'm nervous about the potential of either direction. But my strategy set up, and so I was before this, I was looking for that head and shoulders, right? And so I didn't let that nervousness scare me from entering. I think the question is, as this goes up, the Nasdaq's punching up too. On the way up, we're going to have these little resistance zones to watch. And I think the big one is going to be this kind of major downtrend. And then, of course, once we kind of get more to the highs up here, this reversal zone. And especially this pre-market high right here. This is going to be the first area of risk for if this is just going to whip and then do this. By the time, if it gets up here, I will go break even for sure. And I'll think about trailing. I would love to hold if this thing just breaks out. But I also want to be aware that the market could just be volatile, whipsaw today. and you know, essentially just read what the market's doing, and adjust based on that. So sorry if I'm missing questions. Um, you know, just trying to focus on the trade. I'll look at things when things cool off a little. If you can hit that like button, that'd be really sick to try and just push the stream a little bit more today. Maybe if you hit that like button and actually help this go up, that would be sick to end the week on a win, especially after just this week has been brutal. This week has been really, really brutal in terms of just how hard the market has been to read. And it's just been all over the place. And in terms of a 5-minute, and I guess just to look at a 15-minute actually too of what this trade looks like. I mean, like to me, like I see this double bottom and kind of a fake lower. You know, I think there's still a possibility that we're just doing this, and so that's why I definitely want to be careful. Very similar on the Nasdaq, but to me this looks kind of like a fake lower. I don't know if it's going to turn out that way yet. Again, the Nasdaq could just hit this pre-market top and just rip. We're kind of hitting 10 o'clock, which is a timing. I'll put this line back up. Kind of a timing when things can get a little squirrely. But to me, the read down here was that this is a bottom. I don't know if it's going to be the bottom, but the idea is if this is the bottom, my stop's in a good spot. We're going to push up, and I'm okay holding through a little bit of volatility to let that play out. And if it just pops up here and reverses, I'm okay with that too, you know? Not every trade's going to work out. I'm perfectly happy with the entry. And I was kind of talking about this earlier. I would rather jump in a trade that loses that fit my strategy and looked and I did everything right. You know, you can't control what the market does afterwards. Not every trade, you know, you don't have to be perfect at trading to make money, right? It's more about controlling your executions and entries, and what the market does afterwards, you can't always control. And so, you know, kind of on the flip side of that is having a trade where you jump in that doesn't fit your strategy and it wins. That to me actually isn't a good trade. So here, I think this was kind of the first concern is if the Nasdaq just double tops here and whips. I think it's pretty crazy if it just completely whips that fast. To me, that's an insane move. But insane moves are not out of the gate in this market. That's why I have such a wide stop here. Is I'm okay, a pullback here. I'm nervous right now. I don't like this. It's definitely doesn't. It's not exciting to see this move. I definitely see the potential. This was just a bait higher and it just rips lower, right? But the trade to me is still in play as long as it doesn't break this, and so that's why I haven't moved my stop. But seeing a pullback like this isn't exciting. So nothing I can do right now other than just let it do its thing. Trying to just watch NASDAQ here as well. Just trying to let things play out. Nothing healthy pullback. That's the hope. Yeah, it could totally just do a big sell-off here and then bottom it and continue higher. But I think it's 50-50 right now. Like a big sell-off, like that's almost too big of a sell-off. But again, this is why I have a wide stop. This market is very whippy. It could just make a little bit more of a stab lower, you know, kind of come down here, stop more people out, and then continue. And so, you know, nothing to do other than just kind of let things do. You know, I think the bigger picture here is there's a good potential to go long. That's why I jumped in, and I think the risk reward was there. And that's kind of just, what I'm going off of. Doesn't have to work every time, right? But we could still be, this is almost too fast to actually show up on a 5-minute. But I was looking at, well, we could have a little head and shoulders here, right? So this could be the test of that right shoulder that just happens a little faster because technically the market's open versus it was closed here. But, at this point, I'm not going to try and read into it too much. I'm just going to let it play out. If it bottoms, great. Why don't I add to the trade right here because it's at support and I still think it's going to go up? Yeah, because I just spilled my tea. Because the signal before when I entered in, I think was stronger than the signal right now, right? Like right here, where this was breaking and doing this, to me, the potential is that this could just rip back up, and I get a really nice trade, and it just I'm able to move break even because the potential of having a clean, easy trade is still there. Versus now after this, to me, the potential of a clean, easy trade is gone, right? I still think the big picture could take account and push the market higher, but it's not a clean, easy trade. Like the chances of this working out now and me losing money have gone up. And so to me, the trade actually isn't as good now, which is why I don't want to add on. Doesn't mean it's not going to bottom here and go up, but that's why I don't add on in this spot, is because this is also a scary trap to the upside. If this holds and we just do a little pullback right here, it could totally continue lower and make a new low. And so that's why I don't necessarily add on in a spot like that. Right? You could just say like this little spot right here could have a 50% pullback, which is almost dead even right here at where I entered. And then it could pull lower. I'm not going to get out right there based on that. Now, I could actually move my stop up here to reduce my risk. I think if we do a little pullback here and pop up, I will do that. Because if this is just going to chop, I'm actually okay getting out. Because I think the pullback, I've given it room to kind of move around. And as it just starts to trend here, it looks more and more bearish. But it's hard because you know what? It could just pop here and then reverse. Right now it's just really in that consolidation, figuring out what it's going to do phase. And I think unless it breaks this high and makes a new high, I don't want to trail up yet. Because I really think there is the potential that it just pops here, kind of retests this actual low, and then reverses. And so I don't want to I don't want to trail my stop up too fast out of just fear of, because the trade doesn't look amazing right now. Again, I think there's not enough signals to me yet that that the trade is off the table, and I need to try and reduce my risk as much as possible. It's getting close, but because it's kind of being in this choppy whipsaw spot, I don't want to trail up too tight and just get whipped out and then have it work out. It's really just testing this support zone again right now. NASDAQ is literally just looking the same. And so, again, trying to be methodical about managing in a trade like this is very difficult because it's so easy to read into these micro moves and want to make a decision. Want to trail up because you want to reduce your risk, or there's so many different things you can do. But right now, it's just kind of in a chop fest. And so, I see a lot of people saying stuff in chat of what to look at. And I think that's when that happens, it's very easy to try and start reading into things when it's, it's try and drown out the noise almost, look at a bigger picture and realize, I still think it could just kind of do either direction right now. I don't really think there's any decision to make right now. If it breaks this high right here, I will trail up my stop a little. But until then, I'm not going to do anything with this trade. And if it just rips lower and knocks me out, that's fine. I'm at full size. I'm not at full size. It's nerve-wracking when it starts chopping in the middle of trade. Yeah. I mean, it's nerve-wracking when it starts chopping when you're up a lot of money and you're trailing up, or right when especially when you're at a spot where you want to reduce your risk and try and go break even, or here essentially cut my risk in half. I think those are the hardest spots to control yourself, because it's so easy to be like, oh, I can go break even and I take risk off the table, and then you get stopped out and then the thing goes in your favor because it just does a little bit of a healthy pullback. That's I think the hardest spot to control yourself in terms of managing, and it's hard to do that a lot of the times. It's just playing with my money. Yeah, it's playing with my money, my mind, and my sanity. It just looks like it's just in a little choppy wedge right now. What do I mean by major trend bias aligned? Essentially just means, do I think the big picture, like on a 5 or 15-minute chart, favors the direction that I'm trading, right? So like on a 15-minute chart here, let's do a 5-minute. I think it's a little more clear. Like on a 5-minute chart here, we do have a big, it's kind of hard because I have this trade on, but we had this big downtrend, and then we kind of started to, it set up a double bottom here. We had a failed breakout. Essentially, do I think that the major trend could reverse here and go in favor of our trade? And in that case, that's what the major trend aligned is. Because that's the most important thing, is that you want to be betting with the trend, assuming that the trend is going to continue higher. An interesting thing here is, are we just kind of going into this chop wedge right now? I'm wondering do we just pop up here a little bit and sell back off to kind of, NASDAQ popped a little bit more. I'm not going to move my stop up quite yet. We're still just in this chop range. It feels okay right now mentally because it's kind of near the upper end. But if it pops down here one more time, that's going to be a little nerve-wracking. And I'll maybe be kicking myself that I should have just moved my stop up, but I want to wait until it kind of actually makes a clean punch up here to move my stop up to this area right here. The order I entered in on was a stop market order. For anyone just coming in, essentially what I saw this morning, we were at pretty much a reversal zone that I drew off of a 5-minute of pretty much the pre-market low here. Market opened, had a whip lower, and then from there, it was looking pretty bearish here, but then we had this failed breakout lower, and to me, this signal right here was, okay, we are making a bottom. Like to me, that put alarm bells in my head of, okay, this potentially could turn into the low of the day. And then I wanted to see, okay, us make a little head and shoulders here. So we made essentially a head and shoulders. And I put in an order right above the high of this candlestick. And so as we broke that, because to me, that makes a higher high. And so we broke that, jumped in. And now we're just kind of sitting in this chop, waiting for it to play out in our favor. And to me, it looks like we're just kind of in this wedge right now. And I'm looking to move my stop up to here. And kind of this was a little bit of a breakout I would like to look for. But again, it's just, I want to let it, I think big picture is I want to try and see if it breaks out of this wedge. I want to see it start to move before I really start to trail, because the idea is that the big picture idea is that we've put the bottom in for the day and then we're going to move up. It may take an hour, but what I want to, I don't want to, because the market's been crazy, I want to give it some wiggle room, which is why I have a super wide stop. I'm half size. I'm 2/3 my trading size. And I want to just kind of let it do its thing before it gets moving, because sometimes the market can just chop here before it starts to really accelerate. Trade on Wednesday had that exact thing. I just held in this sloppy uptrend. I eventually got out before it actually ripped higher, which was a bummer in hindsight, but that's kind of what I'm looking for here. And so as this gets going, I'm gonna move my stop up to here now. In terms of moving my stop up to break even, that's gonna be I think we got to move all the way up here, because I think we're gonna pop up to this little level here. We could pull back, and then once we pop up to here, we could pull back to here, retest this area. But to me, you know, NASDAQ here breaking up, pushing these highs, I like that. Struggled here initially, so we might have a little pullback here. But I think the third time that we're testing this, it's going to get broken. Nothing more bullish than a failed bearish move. That is a massive philosophy that I have, essentially, is I like to essentially see, essentially that's what I look for in, you know, we've made this low here. And then to me, this pullback right here, as it pulls down, this is a bearish move failing. Because if this was going to continue in its downtrend, this would have just kept going lower here. But because it reversed, to me, that's a failed bearish move. And that having that happen after what I see as a big bottoming signal is clean. Like, to me, that's a really good sign that things are now going to go the other direction. Why? I'm trying to read your question about why would I go to break even with my stop. Like, why don't I move to my stop, at least to my buy-in? Because if you move it too quickly, you run the risk of getting chopped out. You know, in this market, like, this could easily pop up here, pull back, and then continue up. Now, of course, doing that, I run the risk of it pulling back and just reversing lower, and I lose money. But that's just a part of trading, right? Like, you want to slowly reduce your risk when it makes sense versus trying to go break even as soon as it barely breaks above your trade. Because if I did that right here, because I entered in off of this candlestick, if it broke up here and I went break even, I'd be out of the trade right now. But to me, the signal of the trade being over was not there. You know, to me, I still saw the potential for us to go higher. And so I want to stay in the trade as long as the signal is still there, to a certain extent, of course. Like, once we start to get up to a good risk or level where I've made enough of amount of money on the trade, where we get to a major reversal zone where I think we might actually start to slow down, then I'll trail up a little tighter, because at the end of the day, you also got to think about the money side of things, right? You want to think about the risk reward. And so, that's the hard part about trading is you have to be right about the direction, but you also have to be able to make money consistently from it. And those two things are hard to do. You want to participate in the competition, but your country is not eligible. I know, I'm sorry, that's annoying. I know they're trying to expand it over time, but the NinjaTrader competition that they're having right now, I think, is mainly US and Europe based. I think you can do it in Australia as well, but I know they're trying to push to other countries, and so there will be ones in the future, but sorry, I can't be much more help there on that one. But for anyone who does want to join the NinjaTrader competition, that is eligible, I'll put a link in the chat. It's essentially a free demo trading competition. Free to enter, literally just takes your email, and it's 250,000 real dollar prize pool, and you're literally just demo trading or using a simulated account. So this is getting going here nicely. Just to look at a 5-minute to just look at big picture. I think the first, I have these little highs right here that I'm looking at. I think the first major swing is this guy right here, though, on the NASDAQ. Same with the ES. This is kind of that first major swing. I would like to see us up to at least that level. But I also want to try and manage it as long as we stay in an uptrend. I would like to stay in, because I think just with how this market is, the potential for a big move to the upside could happen. It could get going. And so, essentially, I'll just see how we react. How do we react to these levels as we push higher here? Do we just smash through this? How does that play out? I'm going to move my stop to break even now for sure. If I don't move my stop up and you're worried about it, don't worry. I'm probably using a mental trailing stop. This move is starting to get a little overexhausted and very one directional. I think that's okay, since we did kind of just sit and consolidate here for a while. But I think it's definitely going to need a little pullback. Ideally is we break this and kind of sit here for a minute, flag out, and continue higher. That would be the easiest to hold through, obviously. But I got to be aware that we could just have a pullback like to here and continue higher. That would be healthy too. How was I so justified with the low down here? The way, well, one, because to me, this was a strong reversal zone. And so, we popped down here, kind of sat there for a minute and pushed lower. And then these two candlesticks were very, very bullish. And to me, that shows kind of a trap, essentially, is the market made a new low here, but it got bought up so aggressively that, let's say big banks were really like this level. And so to me, that signal puts in a bottom, and it's hard to know that and to say that I know that because I've watched it so many times. That's where the experience of trading really comes into play, is you just start to get intuition and recognize those moves, and you can key into them and start to say, oh, I really like this as a signal that we're probably going to bottom here. Now let me look for my entry pattern to get in based on that. NASDAQ's hitting this area. It's hard because this is a big move here. So it's like, okay, do I need a trail up here? What does this look like? Holding through this would be not ideal, because we could just do this. The day has been choppy. And so I want to give it a couple candlesticks. I want to see if it does a pullback, what that looks like, because again, I think big picture, we could just, the movements here in the market to have a crazy move. This week is extremely volatile. We've had a massive sell-off overnight. The NASDAQ was down, 1.7 when it opened. We're still down a percentage. The SPY is down still 0.7. Like this only to me looks like a start of a double bottom, big picture. But if this just starts to do this and continues, like if I get up to 2x here and it's just still doing that, I'll probably just do a trailing stop and call it and be happy, I don't want to get overly greedy, knowing that a pullback could be rough and giving too much back. But I think as we pop up and test this, I think a pullback to this previous high, to this now support level, that's what I want to hold through that. Same with the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is just testing this zone. I have it on another screen. So I'm watching it. And here is kind of this uptrend. We do have this uptrend, but I don't want to hold all the way to this. Maybe if we sideways chop, I'll keep it in mind. Just got to be patient. This is where that holding through that horrible bottom and initial 20 minutes of this trade pays off. That's why you don't want to let, why having a wider stop in markets like this is really powerful, and why not letting your emotions tighten you up too fast really, really pays off. You gotta, if the big picture and the read is still there, you don't want to get out. And as this moves up, it's the fear here is it just does this, right? It, in the back of my mind is like, oh, I should trail my stop up, because what if it just does this and just rips lower, right? That's a possibility, but it's so unlikely. And frankly, if it did that, I would think in this market, it would probably just reverse it pretty fast. But that's the fear that starts to come into your head, right? The trade's really starting to work out really well. It's almost working out. I would prefer to see a little bit of a double test here to continue higher. To me, that's healthy. And it looks like we might be doing that. I would like to see a little bit of a bull flag here before we continue higher. Because I think if it just starts to continue to rip, it could just do that. But I think that's less of a healthy move. And I also want to keep in mind that we could just top out here. This could be the end of the move. And so if it starts to slow down, I want to jump out. I'd rather take my profits. But I don't want to tighten up too quickly, because again, I think the big trend has good potential to continue higher. So try not to just let each little tick of a candlestick trigger me. And that's hard sometimes. My P&L for the week, I think before this trade, I was pretty much break even. I had a full size loss. I think it was Tuesday, which in hindsight, I should have been half size. And then I had a win that was smaller size, but I think not yesterday, the day before, it basically evened me out. And then today, essentially this is my profits for the week. And I'm okay with that. This week has been, I think, extremely hard. And so I am totally happy coming out with whatever this trade gives me. And again, this is a pullback. This is kind of the fear. I don't really want to hold all the way down to here. I essentially want to see this pull back and start to give a bullish candlestick, see if it puts in a bottom, and then trail up. Could I be doing too loose of a trailing stop here, and I should have just got out with a trailing stop as we hit the highs, because it was definitely a spot. Um, totally possible. And that's the hard part about a fluid management style is there's so many ways to play it, and you don't always know which is going to be the best one. And so I would like to see a little bit of a bottom here, but knowing that it could just do this. And the hard part here is I don't really have a great spot to pull my stop up to other than I want to get out of the trade because it's going to just give more backup, And so other than up here where I maybe should have, if I was thinking that this was just going to sell off. NASDAQ looks the exact same. I think in terms of a healthy move, this is the spot to pull back to. And it feels really gross to hold to that right now. I almost literally feel a lump in my throat thinking about that. But I think that's the right thing to do in terms of what I'm looking for at this point. I think it's, if I was not looking to hold through this pullback, I should have jumped out here. This is really hard to hold through. It would kill me if this just ripped. And I think if it starts to do a little bit more, I'll definitely jump out. And giving those profits is just gonna be very, very painful. But I would like to see if it bounces here. And then I'll move my stop up here. Because in terms of methodical swings, we're in a volatile market. This makes total sense right here. But it is very gut-wrenching to hold through this pullback right now. It's testing this upwards trend line. This is hard. I think I'll move my stop up to here maybe in a second. Not really a key spot. But if this is just going to continue lower, I'd rather just take a little bit and have my, just walk away with my tail between my legs. I want to give this a second to see if it bounces because I think it's the trend and the play is still in play. It could easily pull back here and re-push the highs. The 5 minute, like if I look on a 5 minute, this gives me a little more confidence. This is just a pullback, healthy pullback in this trend, right? Same with the ES. The ES isn't as strong, but it's literally just retesting this high here. And in terms of a healthy pullback, that makes so much sense. And so that's what I kind of want to go off of. It looks like it's starting to bottom. I don't want to move my stop up yet. I want to see if it stabs a little bit lower and reverses. Because again, I think I'm risking a little bit here to see if the trade will really go in my favor. But I think if this candlestick closes bullish and the next candlestick just rips, I'll get out. But to me, this could be a final stab lower if this uptrend is going to continue. I like that as a pullback. I'm going to move my stop up. At this point, I think that's going to be the bottom. If it's going to bottom, that's the bottom. And if it pops up here and sells off, fine. NASDAQ's doing the exact same. Really brutal watching this. It's really hard for me to not just emotionally make a decision and just jump out. I will say it wasn't necessarily part of what made it harder, I think, was I wasn't necessarily planning for a pullback this far and holding through that. And so I think doing that in real time was added to the difficulty. More I was thinking that the market was so bullish, it was just going to kind of chop and then potentially continue higher or have a little shallower pullback. But this deep of a one, I don't think I was mentally ready for. And now I think I'm happy where my stop is. We're holding the trend line. If it goes up, great. We'll stay in. And if it goes down, we'll get out with a small win. Just going to kind of take a deep breath here and trying to just calm down a little, just because that was a lot and there's nothing for me to do now, until it kind of breaks higher. And if it double tops, I'll definitely trail up. I can see this do a little bit of a pullback to kind of make a higher low, essentially. Essentially just like this. That would be a nice micro signal. Had to take a squat for that one. Yeah, just gotta. Sometimes my lower back gets a little tight, but it's nice to just do a little stretch sometimes. Trading has been a roller coaster to say the least this week. I mean, it's just been crazy. Trying to trade this market has just been very, very difficult. Hindsight has been a killer this week in terms of what you should have done. And so this whole week, other than the first trade of the week, I have been smaller size and wider stops, just because that's what's been, I think, more effective. And it's hard to know when to do that. That's a big thing about trading, is being able to recognize. I got a little bit burned on the first trade in the week because I hadn't recognized and realized that yet. But as you want to be able to, over time, you'll get these tools in your tool belt to be able to know when to adjust. And it'll get faster and faster. Hard watching this on a 1 minute still, just kind of waiting for my fate to be decided. On a 5 minute, I think this looks like it could just be literally if it's gonna continue up, this is just a healthy pullback to the previous high here on the NASDAQ. The ES is pretty similar here. I think it's made a great bottom now. To me, this looks like the trend is going to continue higher. Obviously, it could reverse, but at this point, it's just watching. Nothing to do. Don't want to read into the micro movements because it's not telling me anything other than toying with my emotions. And to be honest, like I suggest you guys don't have the money on the screen. On NinjaTrader, you can literally turn the money off. You can literally change this to be none. I highly recommend doing it, because watching this number move is just another trigger for your emotions. And I only do it because for content. People love to watch that number. They want to see it. If I wasn't doing this, I would have it off. Another thing for your emotions is change your candlestick colors. Don't have red and green. They're very triggering. That's why I have white and blue. Is it just makes things a lot more calm and methodical. Red and green are very triggering numbers. colors, not numbers. Purple and white candlesticks, that's pretty fun too. Yeah, I mean, I think just you can do whatever you want. You could have yellow, and I mean, yellow is kind of an emotional color too. Same with orange. I'm not going to move my stop until we test this high, or we start to make a break of this. But frankly, we could kind of sideways here for a while before we can continue higher. It feels nice to be for it to be pushing up here, but the only reason why I would jump out here is my nervousness of it selling off again, right? To be methodical, there is no reason for me to get out yet. This could just be a little pullback before it continues higher. If it breaks this uptrend, we'll see how it starts to play out. But you know, at the moment, there's just nothing to do. You'd love to see a video on the mental side of trading. I actually did last week post a video on the mental side. I'll just pull it up so to show you which one. And for anyone that is like super new to my strategy and what's going on, if you go to my YouTube channel here, scroll down. If you want to learn my strategy, check out this playlist. If you want to learn about futures, this video talks about that. And then my platform, that'll be a tutorial about that. And then for the psychology one, if you go to videos, the most recent one, this one, talks about trading psychology. They don't do very good algorithm wise, so it probably won't get pushed to you if you're a normal viewer of mine. But I highly recommend going and watching that video because it talks about a lot of that stuff. Is this a prop account? This is my own money. I don't like prop firm accounts. I think for beginners, they're not good. I think they lose most people a lot of money versus if you were just sim trading. I would recommend if you want to trade futures and try this kind of style of trading out. My platform is NinjaTrader. There's a link in the description. You can get started practicing on that, and data is free for the first couple weeks. And then you can literally do it for $4 a month for data. And so I think that's cheaper than any other platform out there. And then once you're ready to take a stab at real money, you can start extremely small because of how futures work. It's looking good. This is a healthy pullback. NASDAQ looks the exact same. I think if we break this, I think it opens the door to up here. On the ES, I think if we kind of break this, there's not really a clean, I mean, I guess the next kind of high is right here that I would look for. Still kind of got to break this high, but to me, it looks like we could be, you know, we're gathering strength. The trend's not over yet. You have to make a $10, a small deposit just into a live account. Yeah, that might be once you get an actual brokerage account. A lot of brokerage accounts want you to deposit a little bit of money. It's kind of like just opening a bank account, you know? NASDAQ, I'm just going to put this uptrend on the NASDAQ just to kind of have that help me here. Anyone coming in, just to kind of give you an idea of my trade here, was I jumped in all the way down here. Essentially, we made a fake lower, did a nice reversal, nice little head and shoulders here, and then I jumped in long right here. Held through this garbage, made a nice move up, held through a big pullback here, with the idea that I think the uptrend is still looks solid. This was a healthy move. Really hard to hold through. And now, just trying to wait to see if this makes a new high, and I'll start to trail my stop up. This trend line is still holding. Like, there's literally no reason to do anything methodical and reading the market until this kind of trend line breaks. Or if we do one more move like this, we just shoot up here, I will trail my stop up and just get out and call it a day. I don't think I have the emotional decision fatigue ability to hold through another pullback like this and not do something emotional. It's hard just letting it sit here because it could just be doing a little double top. Could adjust this trend line a little bit. Basically still just holding this. What trading platform I'm using? I am using NinjaTrader. There's a link for it in the description. There's also, NinjaTrader is also having a demo trading competition right now where it's $250,000 prize pool, real money prize pool. Just to pull it up here one more time. You literally just enter in for free with an email. The first you join a qualifier initially, which has a 20K prize pool, and then if you do good in that one, you move on to the final one, which the prize pool in that one is $190,000. And literally first place of that one gets $100,000, and it's free to enter. It's mainly for people in the US and the UK. I think there's a lot of countries that can't join it, sadly. I know they are expanding though and working to go global. I'll just put a link in the chat for people that want to join that. It's interesting thinking about my trade on Wednesday. I think it was Tuesday. Sorry. Oh, no, maybe it was Wednesday. It was this trade right here. I think I caught from here to here, and then the market just ripped after I got out. And it was interesting because the trade actually never broke the trend line that I had going. And so it's, that's kind of what I'm looking for here, is if this just holds, I don't want to jump out because it's, it's slowing down, it's choppy, it's hard to hold through that. But the trend is bullish, and if we continue and get one more kind of acceleration like this, I think we could make another stab higher. But I do want to keep in mind that we've been choppy. We could just do this today too. Like it's Friday. The day's, getting older and older, essentially, in the sense of the movement might kind of dry up. What I am trading is the S&P 500 futures. Still just kind of chopping. Even if this chops and eventually breaks this trend line, to me, that's still not a signal to jump out. We could just sit in this, and I'm literally just waiting to see it break higher here. The market's just getting, I think, as it stays and doesn't sell off, I think it's getting stronger. First time watching me live, thanks for being here. I appreciate everyone being here. Pretty much just doing this every day I trade. Every day of the week, 4 to 5 days a week. I will be streaming for free on YouTube. Trying my best to help you guys see what it's like doing this and talking through those emotions, because those are a huge part of trading. I think this little pullback right here, a little scary to see, but we could literally just be testing this area. It's hard too sometimes when it's the way this is played out. There was no methodical way to tighten up my stop sooner. And that's how the market can play sometimes, is other than getting out at a specific dollar amount. Like if you're like, okay, my target is just 2x, I'm gonna get out no matter what. Sometimes the market just plays out in a really weird way that, to me, there's no methodical way of moving my stop up. Like this pullback, like I think having my stop here was not smart, because this candlestick could have just got reversed. You know, in hindsight, if this just rips lower, obviously getting out up here would have been nicer. But you know, it's trying to deal with the infinite possibilities and what way of managing and trading is going to best fit the average of what the market could do. And that's, you know, about the best you can do in terms of reading things. So little bounce here. I mean, I think my stop's in a great spot. If it bounces here and goes up, great. If it just bounces here and we're going to actually go down now, I'm totally fine getting out. You know, I think methodically, based on what the market's doing, that's a fine spot. NASDAQ's just testing this area again. Things are just choppy. Looks like it's going to stop run and go back up. Totally could. I think this would be kind of the stop run. If it stops me out and goes back up, I'm okay with that, you know? I mean, my stops, I'm happy where it is. It's technically, if you think about it as well, on the flip side, it's broken the uptrend line. It's made a lower high. That doesn't look good for the long side, you know? That's a short signal, right? To me, and if it breaks this low, I think, you know, it could start doing this. And so that's why I'm getting out here, is because to me, the uptrend wasn't broken yet. And I don't think it's broken until it breaks this low. And just, you know, does it suck to have thought of, oh, I should have got out up here after this big run up and testing this. If it just knocks me out here, you know, that's hindsight, right? It's so hard to know how things are going to play out. You just want to stick with what your read is and try and methodically trade as best as possible. And this, I mean, honestly, frankly, this looks like it's going to stop me out here. It looks like it's going to push lower. But until it does, I don't know. Like we could also just pop up here. Appreciate all the nice things you guys are saying. Been a really hard week for anyone. I know after this week, I need to go and touch grass and really try and reset, because this has been just a very hard trading week. If you're up or down money, it's just been a roller coaster. Um, and so try and do something this weekend that really try and, you know, get away from charts for a while, reset, because this next week could be the exact same thing. It could just be a roller coaster. And it's hard in hindsight, because it makes you think there's so much money that could be made. But on the flip side, there's a lot of money that you could lose. I think it's way easier to lose a lot of money in this market. So out on that. Knocked me out there. I made $400. Obviously, in hindsight, I wish I would have, you know, it would have been nice to be up more, but I think I'm happy with how I played it. I don't think there was really anything I could have done better. I think the pullback, holding through this, I should have been a little bit more, had a plan of, okay, I'm going to hold through a pullback to this, and if I'm okay doing that, um, because I wasn't fully ready for that, even though I did hold through it and it was fine. Um, that was I think I made it harder emotionally on myself. And then, this was just, honestly, this looked good until it didn't, right? I don't think there was any reason to move my stop up. Maybe you could have got out here, you could have got a slightly better price, but it just ripped lower. Um, Tricky spot to try and manage. And I was just trying to give the market some room to see if we could get going higher, because I definitely think that was on the table. So that's trading. Definitely gonna have a kind of review session this week of this week. Try and really prep for next week, because I think there's a big possibility of very similar price action. As always, I really appreciate everyone being here. Um, you know, it's very fun doing this and helping a ton of people. Go check out that competition if you want to go look at it. If you haven't joined. Other than that, have a good weekend, guys. Go touch some grass, reset. I know I need to, because next week I think it's going to be another roller coaster here. And try not to think about the results too much from a week like this, because this week to me has been unprecedented. Like, I have not seen a week like this in years. So it was just extremely tricky, hard to trade. Hindsight was a bitch in terms of what I should have done better, or what you should have done better, or could have made money here. Try not to let that beat you up too much. So that's kind of it. Go check out my YouTube channel if you want to kind of learn more about futures and everything. Other than that, have a good rest of your day, guys, and I hope you have a good weekend. See ya.